And for the forum, I'll be discussing some of the policies I have in mind. But I think that at the end of the day, my outlook is framed around a number of questions that you will be interested in. How do we reduce the cost of living for workers? How do we improve conditions of service of workers? How do we ensure that pensions are adequate for workers? How do we ensure that workers can get access to credit? And so on. So these are some of the questions which, what I will be addressing at the global macro level will have implications for some of these issues that I'm raising. Because at the end of the day, if we have issues that are not resolved at the macro level, they have micro implications. So when I talk about the government and how we reduce the cost of living and create space as far as the fiscal is concerned, is very, very key. One of the things that we have done over the years is that the size of government has grown. Some people say it has grown too large, but it has grown. And government seems to want to do so much in the economic space, build all the roads, build all the hospitals, and everything. In so doing, there's a burden that comes on government, and government is therefore in the process looking to either increase taxes or increase borrowing to do that. One of the key things I want to bring about is essentially to realign government expenditure and bring a part of it towards the private sector. Why do I say this? I think that we can provide a lot of the services without necessarily focusing on increasing government expenditure. The more government expenditure we increase, ultimately we have to tax more or borrow more. And when we have to do that, we create less space to increase the conditions of service of workers. If you have to spend a lot of your resources on paying interest on loans and so on, you end up with less that is available for the people who are doing the work, who are essentially the membership that you talk about, over 90% of public servants in the forum. So I have had an experience which I believe we can take across. When you look at the whole digitalization experiment, the policy of digitalization that we have started here, one of the interesting things about the digitalization policy is that most of it, if not all of it, has been led by the private sector. Most people don't realize it. The Ghana card, digital address, and so on, Ghana.gov, the digitalization of the ports and so on, passport of it. All of it is a private sector-led program, which has meant that we have been able to do something to serve the public without government putting upfront money to do these things. Because if the government was to fund all of these, we couldn't have even gone as far as we have gone in the first place. We wouldn't have done it. But with the private sector putting upfront the money and getting paid in bits over a long period of time, it means that the government didn't have to cough up that money in the first place. And so I think that model is also very instructive in our general economic management. Because if you take it to the universities, for example, you'll see, for example, that you go to Tech or you go to Legon, the hostels are not built by government. They are built by the private sector. and the students are renting them, right? So you see that they are managed and built by the private sector, and we have that service. And you will see, therefore, that there is no delay in the completion of hostels which are being built by the private sector. They build them very quickly because they know they are going to get some revenue coming out of that. And we can apply that philosophy across the whole country, whether you are talking of roads, whether you are talking of classrooms, you're talking of hospitals, you're talking of school buses. Government doesn't have to. Currently, if you're going to buy buses for 700 secondary schools, you have to accumulate all the money for the 700 buses and go and pay for them before you can distribute them. It then takes you a long time. So there are many schools which want buses and don't have buses because government doesn't yet have all the money to go and pay for the buses. So you can say that, well, the private sector give us a lease of 700 buses. They will upfront fund the 700 buses to the schools. Every school will have a bus, and we will pay them monthly or quarterly for the buses, for the use of the buses. And therefore, we don't have to look for that big money to do so. And therefore, the fiscal burden of providing these buses or so on will be much less. It's the same thing that we do with many, many pieces of infrastructure in the schools, for example. We could let the private sector do them, and we pay the private sector over time. And so and when we do that, this fiscal space opens up, and therefore we are able to improve the conditions of service of workers in a better way. But if your space is tight, you are not able to do so. So one of the things that I want us to do in terms of the fiscal space is to really move the burden, shift some of the burden of expenditure to the private sector. And we can provide those services government wants to provide without really putting up a huge expenditure upfront. And I'm looking at, therefore, shifting about 3% of GDP of expenditure from government to the private sector. And that will really open up a lot of space for government in terms of the fiscal space. I also want to make sure that in terms of control of government expenditure, we have an independent fiscal responsibility council to make sure that government expenditure does not exceed 105% of the previous year's tax revenue, so that we maintain a lot of discipline in that sector. So fiscal discipline, along with opening up a lot of expenditure, realigning that expenditure towards the private sector. So that's one major reform that I want to do that will allow government the space to improve conditions of service. The other area that I want us to look at in Ghana, the new policy framework I want us to implement, is to change the tax system. The tax system we have lived with it since independence and maybe before. That's what we've inherited. I've been looking at our tax system for a few years now, and you can see that the general consensus, whether you are looking at individuals, the businesses, is that it is a burdensome tax system. It is not a transparent tax system. A lot of businesses come in and they are given a tax bill and they are in perpetual argument with the tax authorities. How did you calculate this? They can't calculate it. They can't understand it. Same with individuals. And so there is not a lot of transparency. And so compliance within our framework, within our system, compliance is very low. In fact, many people don't even want the tax authorities to know of their existence, so they don't even file tax returns. In fact, that is for most people in the country. So, because the system can be complicated, and if you bring up your head and they see it, they may chop it off. So there's a need to have a simple tax system, a transparent tax system, a tax system that is also easy to enforce by the tax authorities. I've looked at this matter for the last couple of years, looking at what type of tax system will serve Ghana best and is very competitive globally. When I looked at the different countries and the tax systems in the different countries, I found out that the most competitive country in terms of tax competitiveness, the number one country in the world in terms of tax competitiveness is Estonia. Estonia has been number one for the last 10 years in a row. So I found it very curious, read a bit about their system, and then took a team, including GRA and other people, and we went to Estonia to better understand the system and why it was so effective and people were so compliant. Their system is simple. It is a flat tax system. Flat tax is, if it's 10%, you know it's 10%. It's flat, right? If it's 15 or 20%, that is it. So it's very easy to understand for businesses and for individuals. And then you see that compliance is very easy. It's like the tithe we pay in churches. If it's 10%, it's 10%. So that is very, very simple to do. So that is what I believe Ghana should move to. Ghana should move to a flat tax system, very understandable, and move away from this colonial system that we've inherited since independence that is not working. Many businesses come in, they receive tax bills, and they are shut down because they are not able to pay those tax bills. They are locked up. When they are locked up, that means people's jobs are taken away, and so on. And I believe that a flat tax system will really help us. And I think that by the grace of God, when we get into office next year, what I want to do is to let us all start on a clean slate, a fresh slate for everybody. And that means for all of those who haven't filed taxes before and all of that, we are going to give a tax amnesty to everybody, businesses and individuals. So all our struggles with GRA and all of that, we are going to start afresh. A new tax system, a flat tax system, and therefore we are coming with a tax amnesty. A tax amnesty, everybody will start on a fresh, clean slate, and everybody will be filing their taxes going forward very simply. Because as for the tax filing, it will take you 2 minutes or 3 minutes. It's 10% or 15%. Just calculate it and you know what your tax is due. It's not complicated. But you see, one of the things that you may ask, okay, how will this now ensure compliance? When we came into office, only 4% of adult Ghanaians had a tax identification number. 4%. That means 96% did not have a tax identification number. So if you are GRA, you only have data for 4% who have a tax identification number. The rest you don't know. So when we came in, I made the suggestion that when we do the Ghana card, let's make the Ghana card number the tax identification number. And so this is what has happened. Now your tax identification number is your Ghana card number. So far we've issued to adults in Ghana over 17.6 million Ghana cards. So now you have the Ghana card number as your tax identification number. And immediately we have gone up from the 4% of adults with tax identification number. Now we have 85% of adults, from 4% to 85%. And you look at it from independence all the way to 2017, we had just 4% Today we have increased from 4% to 85%, which means that GRA can tell now very clearly, because the Ghana card will tell you that these people should file, even if it is for zero taxes, they should still file. But now you know that these people have not filed. So you have the database to go after those who have not filed. And that is important, because most of the time, it is the formal sector, you and I, where the burden is on. It's not the informal sector. The formal sector is where the burden is on. And so whenever government feels tight or squeezed, they squeeze the formal sector to get more tax revenue. But if we can broaden the tax base and bring in more people, then the pressure on government to squeeze more from the formal sector reduces very, very significantly. So the flat tax system would allow, combined with the Ghana card and our tax identification numbers, will allow for more compliance in that sector. There's also a second leg of the tax reform that I want to look at, and that is to look at the import duty regime to match what we are doing for the income side. The import duty regime in Ghana is also one that traders and individuals who import have major problems with. Sometimes you import something and you think you're going to pay duty of, say, 5,000 cedis, but when it arrives, they tell you it's 7,000 or 8,000 cedis. And you may not be able to pay. They will confiscate the good and maybe end up selling it for 2,000 cedis. Isn't it? Yeah, they will sell it for 2,000 cedis. Meanwhile, you were prepared to pay 5,000. But they would have confiscated the goods and all of that. And so I want us practically to take away, and a lot of these have to do with changes in exchange rate through the period and so on. But I believe that if we say we shouldn't price in dollars, then we should start it at the port. Because if you start pricing in dollars at the port, it then reflects in the rest of the country. So if we believe in our currency, then let us price in cedis at a flat rate at the port. Let's price. So if a spare parts dealer is bringing in spare parts, I want flat rates so that the 40-footer container, you know that, okay, 40-footer is 20,000 cedis, and that is the flat rate. 20-footer is 10,000 cedis. So no matter when the container arrives, you know what the price is. It's very easy to comply with. It's rice, you know what it is. It's poultry, you know exactly what the flat rate is in cedis. And so, because if we keep pricing according to the dollar, there's an inflationary component of it, because the trader, when he's going to the market, he or she will increase the price to make up for the duties they had to pay, because there is no predictability. And not only are they increasing the price for today's duty, they'll start thinking, oh, if I finish selling and I'm going back, maybe it will change again. And then they will increase some more. And so there's this inflationary bias that is introduced if we don't bring predictability to the duty regime. And that's why I want us to do a flat rate in cities and bring predictability to the import duty regime. The next reform I want to bring about in the import duty regime is to look at our competitor neighboring country, which is Togo. Togo, the Lomé port and the Tema port are very close together. And so, because our duties tend to be higher than their duties, a lot of containers are smuggled through Togo, through Lomé, and then through our porous borders into Ghana. That is what happens. And so we don't get the revenue of those goods coming into Ghana through the Togo border. I want us to stop that type of smuggling. And how am I going to do that? I'm going to bring in a new policy that says that Ghana's import duty for any good cannot be higher than Togo's import duty. You set a cap. Our duty cannot be higher than Togo. When that happens, nobody will have the incentive to smuggle again through Togo, because you'll just be wasting your time and money and effort and all of that. So we want to cap the import duty so that you don't need, we can be lower, but we will not be higher. And that means that the goods will come through our ports and we will get the revenue from our ports. And that will change the whole mix. Just simple policies like that will help us in so doing. I want to also bring in a new policy as far as the power sector is concerned. As you know, we've had challenges over the years in the area of power. And a lot of it has come, when I look at where we are struggling, a lot of it has come through our dependence on fuel oils to generate power. Whenever we have challenges with fuel, we have challenges with power supply, by and large. But I want us as a country to move away from the fuel oils to solar power to generate electricity in Ghana. I want solar to be really the heart of the generation mix. Right now, we are not really using a lot of solar. So my policy over the next 4 years, God willing, is that we should bring in 2,000 megawatts of solar power. That is doable. 2,000 megawatts. That's more than half our consumption of electricity. You add that to Akosombo, then you have really brought down the cost of power in this country. So that will bring down the cost of living, will help businesses to produce more, because ab initio, our businesses are very uncompetitive, because you're paying 14 cents, 13 cents per kilowatt hour. Your competitors are paying 5 cents, 6 cents to produce the same good. You will have a problem. You can't compete. So I believe that if we can move towards solar power and bring in 2,000 megawatts to start with, it will be very good. When I announced this policy on February 7th, 2 major countries have come since that announcement to say, each of them say they can do 2,000 megawatts in 4 years. And I said, oh, well, and maybe if you can do 2,000 each, then maybe we should do 4,000. So that each of you can do 2,000 rather than that, if the price that you are talking about makes sense to us. But I think that if we do this, there will be huge potential. The first major potential, if we can move towards solar, is that it gives us an opportunity to set up solar panel manufacturing factories here in Ghana. We shouldn't just do solar by going to import solar panels. That would be a mistake. 2,000 megawatts of solar power means a lot of solar panels. It doesn't make sense for us to be importing all of those solar panels. We should produce them right here in Ghana, establish that capacity, and then be able to even export these panels to the sub-region. And I think that will create jobs and create more opportunities for all of us. So I think that moving towards solar power becomes very, very important. I also believe that Ghana should refocus on large-scale commercial agriculture, mechanized agriculture, irrigated agriculture, apply more technology, and all the countries that have done so well, like Ukraine before the war that they're going through right now, have really focused on large-scale commercial agriculture, infusion of a lot of technology with irrigation to do that. And I believe that that will really help us bring down the cost of food. In the area of transportation, public transport, I am proposing that we move to electric vehicles. electric buses would really change the public transport cost significantly. Why do I say so? You don't have to be buying petrol or diesel every day to run them. They are running on power, on electric power, the batteries that are charged. The parts of the vehicle are very minimal. So the two elements in the cost of transport in our country is fuel and spare parts. We can really bring them down significantly. Anytime the fuel prices increase, immediately they increase the transport fares. But when they come down, they don't decrease them. So when I ask, why aren't you decreasing them? They tell me the spare parts prices have gone up. So I said, okay, very soon we'll have electric buses. And I'm hoping that we can have at least even 200 electric buses to have a proof of concept this year before we even enter next year, so that people will see how the buses can bring down the cost of transportation in our country. And I believe that the estimates we have is that at least we will bring it down by at least 40%, which is very, very important for all workers in the public sector. And we are talking to STC, Nana Komia is here, Metro Mass, and they are all working, even VIP and all of that, towards Ghana moving electric and all of that. That will bring down the cost of transport very significantly. Then one of the other areas I want us to do, which will really help all of us, is the digitalization of the land registration and transfer titling processes. The digitalization will really allow all of us. Right now, the dispute over land, I'm sure we have all been victims, that you go and buy land and you think you bought it from the right owner, only to be in the middle of building and then you are told to stop work because there's a case filed in court and that you are not the true owner of the land. The experiences of people is just so much in the area of land. And if you look at any country that has developed, look at all the advanced countries in the world, land has been one of the key factors, because the wealth in land is so huge. Because when you have land and you are developing land, it employs architects, it employs carpenters, masons, POP people. The employment that is generated in land is huge. Then you have mortgage markets developing. If you don't have a good sense of the title of land, you wouldn't have mortgage markets. Banks are afraid of even land as collateral because they could get themselves involved in litigation whenever it comes for enforcement. So they even discount, if you bring land, they discount your land asset as collateral. Sometimes they are not really interested in it. So if we are going to deal with this issue and allow mortgages to develop so that workers can buy houses and pay over 30 years, 25 years, then we have to resolve the land issue, the land titling issue. The best way to go about it is to digitalize the process. So we do the mapping of all the land and assign the ownership properly so that anybody sitting in your house, wherever, inside Ghana or outside Ghana, if you are given a piece of land and you enter the coordinates, you will be able to tell exactly who owns the land before you engage in negotiation. A lot of the times we are not able to tell. And then sometimes if you go to the lands registry, you are not given the right information. And then you end up in problems. So what we want to do is to digitalize the process for land registration. I know that a lot of land is stool land. And because it's vast, many of the chiefs don't register them because the registration fees for that vast amount of land can be high. So my proposal is simple, let us waive those registration fees and allow all the land to be registered. Because it is a very good piece of infrastructure for Ghana to allow all the land to be registered. When the chief sells the land, we can take out the registration fee at that point. But for now, let us make it open and allow anybody who is registering the land to register. When there's a transfer, we can take our money out of it. But for now, it becomes a very, very difficult process, and we should defer the fees until a sale is made. But I think that if we are able to digitalize this process, and I think that we have started some work towards this process already, and I want us to really actualize it. When we digitalize the process, it will make life much easier for workers. Let me just add one more thing associated with this. Because when I talk about mortgages, it means you are getting credit on the basis of the title of the property to buy the house or to build the house. That is the credit on the basis of the collateral of the property. One of the things in terms of the credit that really is important and makes a distinction between workers abroad in the advanced countries and workers in Ghana. One of the key differences is that workers abroad, when they are paid $1,000, they are able to spend $10,000. Workers in Ghana, if you are paid $1,000, you'll be even lucky for the $1,000, no, not $1,000, 1,000 cedis. You'll be lucky for the 1,000 cedis to see you to the end of the month. Isn't it? Yeah, so they are able to spend 10,000. You are not able to do that. Why are they able to spend 10,000? Because they have access to credit. In sub-Saharan Africa, only South Africa has a credit reference system for individual borrowers, individuals in the system. And this is why when we came into office, we said, look, let us put together something that allows us eventually to have a credit scoring system in Ghana. And now, this is where we are headed. We've put together the key pillars for a credit scoring system. You have the Ghana card, which has now been linked to your bank account, to your SIM card, to your DVLA, to your National Health Insurance, to your GRA, and all of that. We are linking all of this. So when you pick the profile, the Ghana card number of any individual, you will have a lot of data about the person. And you can therefore be able to calculate a credit score either based on their bank information or even their mobile money information. And so Ghana is now, I'm happy to say, we are now in a position to start individual credit scoring. And Ghana will be the second country in Sub-Saharan Africa to be able to do it. And we're going to start it this year. We'll launch it very, very soon. Bank of Ghana has given the license to the Credit Reference Bureau. And therefore, once you have your Ghana card, you can get onto the website and you put it in there and you'll see your credit score. And every lender will see your credit score. So it is on the basis of that they will make a decision to give you credit or not to give you credit. Today, without the individual credit scoring, we are all assumed to be bad borrowers, all of us. We've all been lumped up as bad borrowers. So if you go to borrow, they'll give you a high interest rate. And if even you are lucky, you'll get some credit. If you are not lucky, they won't even lend to you. So as it is now, we are all bad borrowers. You can't distinguish between the good one and the bad one. But once the credit scoring starts, people will be more disciplined. Because if you don't repay, it will affect your credit score. And you'll be a bad number one. And all the people manning our drone centers, the 6 drone centers, all are 100% Ghanaians. Young men and women. 2 months ago, a mother company in San Francisco came to recruit a Ghanaian to go and lead a team in San Francisco on drone flight operations. Because the experience is here. They are the best in the world. We are the best in the world in these things. You have digital address system that we implemented. We are only the second country in the world to do so. Today, we have the Ghana card, a digital ID card. The EU has asked all its countries to issue the Ghana card equivalent by 2030. 2030. They don't have it. Today, the US is discussing it in the Senate and the Congress that they should also issue a digital ID card. In the United States, they don't have it. Mobile money interoperability, they don't have it in the United States. We are the first country in Africa to do so. E-pharmacy, they don't have it. We are the first country in Africa to do so. So we have to understand that we can be the best. We can really be the best if we put our minds to it. And I want us to come together, and I want Ghana to give me a chance to take this leadership and to take the steer and drive this vehicle. I have a lot of clarity in terms of where I want to go. I want to fight corruption, and corruption really requires a lot of political will to fight it, isn't it? I've been fighting corruption with a lot of systems, digital systems that we have been using. When we faced the issue of ghost workers, I said, let every worker be identified with their Ghana card, isn't it? So every worker has fingerprints, but the ghosts don't have fingerprints. Immediately we said that the ghost disappeared. In the National Service Scheme alone, 44,000 workers disappeared. In SNP pension can help us deal with corruption. That's what we have done in the ports, with paperless, DVLA, and so on. But you also need the political will to enforce corruption, but the fight against corruption. I'm prepared for it, and I want you to give me the opportunity and the chance to take Ghana to a different level. I believe that, and this is why we are consulting very broadly, I believe that we can do something new for our country, something much better, and I want to work very closely with you, to consult with you every day. I want to help. I want to help the vulnerable. I want to help the poor. I want to help the disadvantaged. I want to use this opportunity to change Ghana. Thank you very much for your attention.
A round of applause for His Excellency. And before we move ahead, a short musical interlude, once we stretch our hands.